Hi everybody, for this video I want to do just a quick video, kind of a food for thought type of thing. This has to do with the resistance movement that I didn't even know existed because I didn't know something needed to be resisted. So what happened after the Civil War? Well, the South lost, and so then they needed to be reincorporated back into the US. So that whole process was called Reconstruction. What happened with Reconstruction? I didn't really know it, but Reconstruction completely failed. And it didn't fail because it wasn't implemented well. It failed because it was actively resisted. And so the success was the failure of Reconstruction. And so the book that I was looking at was the resistance movement in support of Reconstruction. So kind of a complex thing. It's going off this book, The Bloody Shirt, Terror After Appomattox, where that city there is where the Civil War ended. So the idea is that actually the Civil War didn't stop the things that we thought it was going to. So after the Civil War, they passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which said you can't have slavery, and you can't deny someone being a citizen, and you can't deny someone being able to vote. So how would the South get around that? Well, what they did was, I'm going to read from a quote from one particular senator from South Carolina where he describes the process. He says, "How did we recover our liberty?" By liberty here, of course, he means not having to have slaves vote or black people vote. "How did we recover our liberty? By fraud and violence. We tried to overcome the 30,000 majority by honest methods, which was a mathematical impossibility. After we had borne these indignities for 8 years, life became worthless under such conditions. Under the leadership and inspiration of Mark Gary, because he planned and brought about the straight-out movement of 1876, we won the fight. In 1878, we had to resort to more fraud and violence, and so again in 1880. And then he goes on and talks about how they made a registration law, and then they had an 8-box system where you had to turn it in 8 different places in order for it to count. So finally then the South's strategy was they all amended their constitution. So they started in Mississippi and then went to South Carolina and other places. And they added a clause that said in order to be able to vote, you had to be able to understand and explain different parts of the Constitution. So that was how Reconstruction failed, and this whole book is about how did people resist that process? How did they support implementing the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment? And it's a really sad story. All of the different people were not really a movement because some of them barely even knew each other, but they were all in their own locations really working to try to make sure that people got justice. And it was a really sad book to read, to watch them all get almost essentially destroyed in the process of trying to uphold this. And some of them like barely survived because the states that they were living in wanted so strongly to make sure that black people couldn't vote. So I'm not going to go in detail into this, but I guess my question is, how do you think that you could resist something like that? I think it's easy to think we have this kind of upward trajectory, and reading this book makes you remember that actually that's not really the case at all. It wasn't until the 1960s, that the protections that were guaranteed actually came about. So just wanted to throw that out there, see where everybody's at, and kind of think through that together. Thanks.